All right, let's dive in. We're going back, way back to December 92.
Okay, yeah.
America, a bit of a lot of unrest, honestly. And the world of hip-hop, changing, evolving.
Definitely a time of big shifts.
And then, boom, Dr. Dre drops Nothing But a G Thang.
Featuring Snoop Dogg, of course. Can't forget that.
This wasn't just another song. This was I don't know, like a cultural earthquake.
Absolutely. And what's wild is Dre was already a legend. I mean, NWA, come on.
Right. He could have just coasted.
But instead, he uses this song to, well, he basically invents G-Funk.
G-Funk, yeah. For anyone who somehow hasn't heard it, think smooth grooves, these heavy synth, and that West Coast vibe.
Instant classic.
You know what? Let's just hear it. That opening synth.
Oh, man.
Plays a snippet of the opening synth from Nothing But a G Thang.
Gets you every time.
Right. Like chills. And hey, before we go any deeper, quick reminder. If you dig this, hit that subscribe button. Share this deep dive with your friends, especially the ones who, lived through the 90s or wish they did.
We're all about those stories behind the songs. The ones that, well, they defined a whole decade, really.
Back to G-Funk. It's almost hard to put into words.
It's like, imagine trying to explain a feeling. That's what it was, like Sonic Sunshine, but with an edge.
Yeah, that's good. So, cruising down the boulevard, hanging with your crew, good times.
That's part of it, but it also reflected the reality of LA back then. Social tensions, economic struggles, it was all there under the surface.
And that's what's so brilliant about Nothing But a G Thang.
Yeah.
Right? It captured both sides.
Totally. Like you could escape into it, but it never pretended things were perfect.
An escape, but honest.
Exactly. And for a whole generation, it was a voice. A way to express hopes, frustrations, everything.
Way beyond LA, too. Nothing But a G Thang became this anthem. Camaraderie, self-expression. It was huge.
Massive. And think about it. This wasn't just a West Coast thing. This song put G-Funk on the map.
Like suddenly everyone was trying to catch that wave.
Yeah, you had Warren G, Nate Dogg, so many others. Hip-hop had this whole new energy.
It challenged the East Coast, which had been dominating up to that point.
Big time. But it wasn't only the music. The lyrics, they painted this vivid picture. Life in South Central, celebrating Black culture, pushing back against stereotypes.
And the video. Dre directed it himself. Lowriders, house parties, the whole G-Funk aesthetic.
It was all right there.
It's interesting, though. The song has this joy, this celebration of life, but there's also that subtle social commentary.
Oh, for sure. You feel the sense of community, but also the awareness of the struggles. It wasn't just about partying.
It was about representation, about giving a voice to people who weren't always heard.
Exactly. And that's where Dre's genius comes in, right? I mean, the guy takes A Woman to Woman by Joe Cocker, a soulful ballad.
A classic in its own right.
And he flips it. Layers of synths, drums, and boom, you have the foundation of this iconic hip-hop track.
He paid homage to the original while creating something totally new. Incredible. And speaking of genius, let's not forget, Nothing But a G Thang launched two careers, really.
Oh, yeah. This was Snoop's big debut. And man, his flow, those lyrics, he was a star from the jump.
The chemistry between him and Dre, undeniable.
Yeah.
They went on to make so much great music together.
For sure. This song, it broke records, topped Billboard for weeks. It became a cultural phenomenon beyond just music.
The phrase Nothing But a G Thang is like part of the language now.
Exactly. But beyond the numbers, it's the lasting impact, It's still seen as this pivotal moment in hip-hop history.
A game changer. It redefined the genre and inspired, countless artists.
No doubt about it. And it really shows you the power of music, how it just captures a moment and then boom, it's timeless. You hear that synth today, you're right back in the 90s.
It's true. But I think what makes Nothing But a G Thang really stick with people, it's those themes, friendship, ambition, being true to yourself.
It's universal, yeah. No matter who you are or when you heard it first, it connects.
Totally. And let's not forget Dre's production on this, next level stuff. All those sample synths, drums,
it's a wall of sound, but it all fits together so perfectly.
It's one of those tracks you can listen to 100 times and still hear something new. Like layers,
Right. And going back to what we said before about the social commentary, it's subtle, but it's there. It wasn't just about, glorifying a lifestyle. It was showing the real LA, the complexities.
Yeah, there's that line, Dre's rap. It's like this and like that and like this. And simple, maybe, but
it speaks to that whole idea of navigating a world where things aren't easy, not black and white.
it's deep. And it's easy to miss that when you're caught up in the beat, how smooth it is. But Dre and Snoop, they were telling a story. Real experiences.
They shared their perspective, and people connected with that deeply.
It made it more than just a party anthem, that's for sure.
It was a cultural statement for sure, but also it was about life, about community, being strong, pushing through. Those are timeless things.
You know what's wild? This track, it was supposed to be a solo song for Dre originally.
Really? I didn't know that.
Right. Yeah. The story is Snoop was just hanging out in the studio while Dre was working on the beat, and he just starts freestyling over it.
I can picture it.
Dre was blown away, and boom, collaboration.
That's crazy. Those chance moments, sometimes they make music history.
Imagine if Snoop wasn't there that day. It would be a completely different song.
Totally. It's like fate, right? Brought them together for this masterpiece. And hey, speaking of masterpieces, before we go any further, little reminder. If you're loving this deep dive, subscribe to that 90s pod, tell your friends about it. We've got new episodes every week all about the music, the culture, everything that made the 90s so iconic. Back to Nothing But a G Thang, though. It's really interesting to think about where it fits in the whole evolution of hip-hop, you know?
It was a time of big change, for sure.
Yeah, hip-hop was starting to branch out, experimenting with sounds, styles, and G-Funk, with that funk influence, the soul, the West Coast attitude, it was a huge part of that.
It paved the way for so many artists, so many subgenres. It's hard to overstate how influential it was.
Totally. You think about all the artists who say Nothing But a G Thang was an inspiration for them. It's a long list. From Tupac to Kendrick Lamar, it goes on and on.
It really does. But what about today? Could a song like this, with that laid-back vibe, all those West Coast images, could it still have that same impact now?
That's the big question, right? I mean, the music industry, the world, it's all different now than it was back in '92.
So much new music, new trends all the time. It's hard for anything to really break through and stay with people.
True. But Nothing But a G Thang, it's got something special. It's just got that thing that makes it timeless.
The production still sounds so fresh. The lyrics are still relevant. The story's universal.
Yeah, and even though the music scene's different now, I think there's always space for that G-Funk sound. Maybe it wouldn't be a chart topper like back then, but it would definitely find an audience.
Who knows? Maybe it would even start a whole revival.
That would be something else. Imagine a whole new wave of G-Funk artists bringing back that West Coast vibe.
It could happen. You never know. Music has a way of coming back around.
Nothing But a G Thang proved that a song can be fun, but also have something to say, celebrate a culture, but also make you think about important things.
And that's what makes it a classic, you know? It's a reminder that music can have real power, connect with people across generations, and stay relevant even decades later. So as we wrap up this deep dive into Nothing But a G Thang, I'm curious, what's the biggest thing that sticks out to you about the song's legacy?
You know, it's really something how this track managed to grab onto this specific moment in time, but it also has this timeless quality to it. It's like a perfect snapshot of early 90s LA. But the themes, friendship, resilience, staying true to yourself, those are universal. That's why it still works for people today, even if they weren't even born when it first came out.
It really shows you the power of music, right?
Yeah.
How it can bridge those gaps between generations, different backgrounds. And it's not just nostalgia either. Nothing But a G Thang was a part of something bigger, a real cultural shift in hip-hop. It pushed boundaries, changed the game.
For sure. It opened the door for so many artists that came after. Hard to imagine what hip-hop would even sound like today without the influence of G-Funk and Dre's whole approach to production. He was innovative, man.
It challenged the way things were done, brought in a whole new perspective, and did it with style, swagger, and an irresistible beat, too.
It's true. Decades later, and Nothing But a G Thang is still an anthem. It celebrates a culture, generation, and it just shows you the power music has, how long it can last.
So as we sign off here, let's leave our listeners with something to chew on. We talked about the song's impact in the 90s, its legacy, but what about today? Like, if Nothing But a G Thang dropped now, in 2023, same song, same vibe, do you think it would have the same impact?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's really impossible to say for sure, but I do think it would definitely get people talking. The music industry, the world in general, it's just a totally different landscape than it was back in '92.
That's true.
But the themes of the song, that stuff about friendship, resilience, staying true to yourself, those are timeless. I think it could still connect, definitely.
It would be so interesting to see how a new generation would take it, how they'd interpret it, respond to it. Maybe it would even spark a whole new wave of G-Funk artists. Who knows?
Yeah, there's always a chance for music to come back around, you know? Full circle. Maybe we'll see a resurgence of that laid-back West Coast sound in the coming years.
Well, folks, That's all the time we have for our deep dive into Nothing But a G Thang. Hope you enjoyed this trip back to the 90s. And hey, if you did, be sure to subscribe to that 90s pod for more explorations of the music, the culture, all the iconic moments that made that decade so special. Until next time, stay groovy.